Okay, so now that we've covered the age of the common man, now we're going to look at territorial and economic expansion after that period, which ends up leading to ultimately the Civil War. So Texas. In 1823, Mexico won its independence from Spain, and Mexico tried to attract more settlers in order to farm Texas. They wanted Americans, but they had some frictions that came up when Mexico outlawed slavery in 1829 and required all immigrants to convert to Roman Catholicism. By 1830, the Americans outnumbered the Mexicans in Texas 3-1. In 1834, General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna made himself dictator of Mexico, and he abolished the nation's federal system of government. He attempted to enforce Mexico's laws in Texas, and a group of American settlers led by Sam Houston, yes, the guy Houston, the city is named after, Sam Houston revolted and declared Texas to be an independent republic in 1836. Then in 1836, American settlers revolted and claimed Texas as an independent republic. Well, Santa Anna didn't like that. The Mexican army led by Santa Anna captured the town of Goleadad and attacked the Alamo in San Antonio, killing every one of its American defenders. Shortly afterward, however, at the Battle of San Jacinto River, an army under Sam Houston caught the Mexicans by surprise and captured Santa Anna. The Mexican leader was then forced to sign a treaty that recognized Texas independence and then granted the republic all territory north of the Rio Grande River. Mexican legislature rejected the treaty and then insisted that it was still part of Mexico. So the first president of the Republic of Texas, or the Lone Star Republic, was Sam Houston. And in 1824, the U.S. attempted to annex Texas as a state, but it was refused by the Senate because they didn't really want to make Mexico mad. So if you look here, the Alamo is on the screen, and so is the Battle of San Jacinto. And you can see the disputed territory of Texas, and you can see how far north that Mexico reached at this point in time. As for Maine, we had boundary disputes between Maine and the Canadian province of New Brunswick. Now remember, Canada was under British rule. Then came the Aroostook War, known as the Battle of the Maps. The treaty resolved the war, the Webster-Ashburton Treaty of 1842, and any disputed territory was split between Maine and British Canada, and it ultimately settled the boundary of the Minnesota Territory. So fairly quick and easy. So if you look at this map, you can see Maine up here and the disputed territory circled up here. And then the Webster-Ashburton Treaty line dealing up there. So again, at this time, Canada was led by the British, and America wanted to get their boundaries straightened out. As for Oregon, again, a British-American dispute because, remember, Britain controlled Canada. Britain wanted part of the profitable fur trade, and the U.S. based its claim on the discovery of the Columbia River by Captain Robert Gray in 1792, the Lewis and Clark expedition, fur trading posts in Astoria, Oregon. They were like, hey, we're there, we've been there, it's ours. So they were fighting over these two areas, and it ultimately came down to splitting it with the 1846 treaty boundary. Now, the election of 1844. The Texas annexation was opposed by most Northerners because there were slaves there. Democrats were divided between Martin Van Buren and John C. Calhoun. They ended up nominating a dark horse, or a lesser-known candidate, James K. Polk. He was a protege of Andrew Jackson. Polk was committed to expansion and manifest destiny, and he favored the annexation of Texas, the, quote, reoccupation of all of Oregon, and the acquisition of California. His campaign slogan was 54-40 or fight, which that referred to the line of latitude that marked the northern border between the Oregon Territory and Russian Alaska. The Whig candidate was Henry Clay of Kentucky. he attempted to straddle the controversial issue of Texas annexation, saying at first that he was against it and then saying he was for it. That didn't really work out so hot for him. The Democrat Polk ended up winning the election. So the leaving president, John Tyler, he pushed for Congress to pass a joint resolution for the annexation of Texas, but this left the incoming president, Polk, with the problem of dealing with Mexico's reaction. Really nice of John Tyler there. Polk compromised with Britain, and he ended up settling for half of the Oregon Territory, and it divided it at the 49th parallel, as we saw in the previous map. So the U.S. annexation of Texas led to a diplomatic trouble with Mexico. 11 American soldiers were killed on April 24, 1846, along the Rio Grande. The war was essentially a military disaster for Mexico, and ultimately it led to the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848, where Mexico recognized the Rio Grande as the southern border of Texas. The U.S. took possession of the former Mexican provinces of California and New Mexico. This is known as the Mexican Cession. And then the Wilmot Proviso tried to ensure that slavery was forbidden in those new territories, but that was defeated in the Senate. So slavery was ended up, we'll get to how slavery was decided there. So if you look at this map here, the Mexican Cession, we got in 1848, Texas taking it on in 1845, Oregon Territory up from the British. We still got the Missouri Territory hanging out. And then don't forget about where the Native Americans were sent by Jackson in Oklahoma with the reservations. Polk then offered to purchase Cuba from Spain for $100 million, but Spain refused to sell it. And in 1852, Franklin Pierce sent 3 American diplomats to Belgium, where they secretly negotiated to buy Cuba from Spain. But this was leaked to the American press, known as the Ostend Manifesto, and anti-slavery members of Congress got really mad because they would have had slavery there. So Pierce dropped the scheme and decided not to buy Cuba. If we look at the election of 1852, Franklin Pierce versus the Whig Scott. The third party was the Free Soil Party at that point. They had nominated Hale. You can see that the Democrat Pierce won the election pretty solidly. So there was this guy named Walker. He tried to take Baja California from Mexico in 1853. He then took over Nicaragua in 1855, trying to create a pro-slavery Central American empire. He was a little crazy, and in 1860 he ended up getting executed by Honduran authorities because he was pushing his limits a bit too much. The Clayton-Bulwer Treaty, signed in 1850, we wanted to build a canal through Central America, making it a lot quicker and easier to move to the West Coast shipping-wise. Great Britain and the U.S. agreed to this Clayton-Bulwer Treaty, where neither nation would attempt to take exclusive control of any future canal route in Central America. This treaty continued until 1901. In 1853, President Pierce added a strip of land in the American Southwest to try to build a railroad that basically got us the southern sections of New Mexico and Arizona with the Gadsden Purchase. Fur traders were the earliest non-natives to open up the far west in the 1820s. They had annual meetings in the Rocky Mountains with the American Indians. You had overland trails like the Oregon Trail, California Trail, Santa Fe Trail, and the Mormon Trail. Those helped people get to the West a lot more quickly. As for the mining frontier in 1849, California Gold Rush happened. Yes, that's why the San Francisco 49ers are named the San Francisco 49ers. You've got gold and silver rushes in Colorado, Nevada, the Black Hills of the Dakotas, and other Western territories. By the 1860s, almost 1/3 of the miners in the West actually happened to be Chinese immigrants. As for farming, you've got the Preemption Acts of the 1830s and 40s gave squatters rights, basically if you're on the land, it's yours, to settle public lands, and it started to isolate the frontiers. As for the urban frontier, you have Western cities coming up because of railroads, those mining and farming. Our big cities at this time are going to be San Francisco, Denver, Salt Lake City. So if we look at the settlement of the Western frontiers, you can see the multiple trails that move west. So the blue trail is the Mormon Trail, the green trail is the Oregon Trail, the red trail is the California Trail, the darker red is the Spanish Trail, and the purpley is the Santa Fe Trail. You can see that most of them start in Missouri and Illinois and then move through the west. They were the easiest ways to get through all of those mountains to get to the west. At this point in time, we're expanding the economy as well. You've got textile mills in New England. Sewing machine was invented by Elias Howe, so no more, like, you didn't have to use hand stitching. You have the electric telegraph in 1844 by Samuel F.B. Morse, making it much easier to communicate. And then railroads in the Northeast and Midwest. You can see some of them on this map in the South, but largely you can see the biggest connected areas are in the North and Midwest. Now, if you think about it, how might this become an issue in 1861? What starts to happen in 1861? We have the Civil War. So if you have things that are easier to move through the North, it's going to move through the North really quickly. The South, it's going to struggle to move through. As for foreign commerce, we are shipping on a regular schedule. We've got a whaling boom that led to whale oil to be used for light lamps. You've got improvements in ship design, making travel easier. Steamships now, making it much easier to go up and down rivers. And then Commodore Perry, you should remember this from world history, he opened up Japan to trade in 1854. So that's a big movement in foreign commerce with the US. Unfortunately, the boom of the mid-century ended in a panic of 1857. You've got prices dropping sharply, especially for Midwestern farmers. You've got a large amount of unemployment in northern cities, and cotton prices remained really high, leaving the South less affected, which led to the belief that the plantation economy was therefore superior, and then that they didn't need to be united with the northern economy because the northern economy was what was dragging them down.